Like I said, we're going to be kind of out of the Roman series for a little bit here, and this is an opportunity to teach something that we don't normally get to teach, or that I haven't normally spent a lot of time teaching, and one of the Psalms. And um, this one in particular is a favorite of mine because I've had to turn to it and lean into it when things got rough. And I remember a day, it wasn't that long ago, at my last job where I walked in the morning, and very shortly thereafter, it was very clear that something was very off. It was very clear that something was changing. And you could tell everybody walking on pins and needles, every management and supervisor and team lead all in one building, in one space of the building. And then I watched as person after person was marched into the office and then shown the door. And then my name. And then I got my papers to get laid off. Never happened before. I was always the employee you kept. But for some reason, I wasn't. And the ground fell out from beneath my feet. It was 2 months before my daughter was to be born. And every plan we had, everything that we had put into place in order to give her the life in the future that we wanted, none of it accounted for me not having a job. And everything started to collapse. And I know that I'm not the only one who has ever walked in this feeling. I know that I am not the only one that's ever been laid off. I know that I'm not the only one that has actually stood there and wondered in the moment that everything seems like it's shaky. That maybe it's a phone call from a doctor and it's cancer. Or maybe it was divorce papers from a spouse you thought would never leave you. Or maybe it's the anxiety that is constantly whispering that it is your failures, your inadequacies, telling you that you are not enough and that you don't even deserve rest to attempt a recovery. Or maybe it's just scrolling and watching too much and noticing how the world around you is becoming louder, angrier, and more unstable. One moment life feels secure and grounded and guaranteed, and the next it feels like everything is being shaken apart beneath you. What really terrifies us in those moments, though, is when we realize how little control you actually had to begin with. See, Psalm 46 was written for exactly moments like that. Moments when life isn't easy. Moments when life becomes dangerous instead of safe. Moments when the weight of the world feels heavier than that which we can carry. And Psalm 46 does not tell us that we are enough. It is not going to tell you simply to believe in yourself. It does not tell you just to pull up your bootstraps. It in fact gives us a truth that is far better than anything we can come up with on our own. And it is all right, Ian, you're up. You're running them today, right? See all that for nothing. It is when everything else shakes and gives way, God does not. Stand for the reading of Scripture. Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, a helper who is always found in times of trouble. Therefore, we will not be afraid, though the earth trembles and the mountains topple into the depths of the seas, though its water roars and foams and the mountains quake with its turmoil. Selah. There is a river Its streams delight the city of God, the holy dwelling place of the Most High. God is within her. She will not be toppled. God will help her when the morning dawns. Nations rage and kingdoms topple. The earth melts when he lifts his voice. The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Selah. Come, see the works of the Lord, who brings devastation on the earth. He makes wars cease throughout the earth. He shatters bows and cuts spears to pieces. He sets wagons ablaze. Stop fighting and know that I am God, exalted among the nations, exalted on the earth. The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Selah. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. Again, the author is writing a truth that we need to understand. He is telling us that when everything else shakes and gives way, God does not. And that leads us to asking ourselves, how is it? What is it about God? Why isn't he shaken? Why doesn't that happen? What changes? Well, the first one is that he's going to go over, and the psalmist is going to tell us this. And he tells us that God is stable. This psalm is really written in 3 verses. You got to remember, Psalms is poetry. It's Hebrew poetry. So it's written in 3 verses. There's a refrain, right? There's a chorus. We see a repeated line. There's a place to pause and consider what you've said. So we're pulling from this poetic truth a reality about God that we need. And so he starts with right here that God is stable. We're getting ready to head to North Carolina, and I can remember the first time I was in North Carolina when I was a kid with my grandfather and my aunt and uncle on the Outer Banks. And it was the first time I'd ever been visiting the coast or anything like that, and a storm kicked up. And if you're familiar, Bob has 100 stories, but if you're familiar with storms coming up off the ocean, you know if you've not experienced a storm like that, it can be a jarring experience. One problem. The homes on the Outer Banks are typically secured to the ground by stilts. The majority of the homes elevated off the ground with maybe a ground level garage, but not like here. Not the foundation we're used to. Not the 6 and 8 foot tall basement walls we know can provide shelter to us. No, this house is up on sticks. And we were going during hurricane season. And I had never felt wind like that. And I was terrified, but I didn't know it at the time. Even though every adult in the house was acting like nothing was wrong, I thought they were just crazy. No, what they knew is that the houses were actually built to endure that. That even though I looked outside and I said, wow, this house is held up by 4x4s, right? It's not even 6x6s, right? That you can see. It's 4x4s. They knew it would hold. They knew that it was safe. They knew that the house was engineered to endure hurricane-level winds within reason. That they're stable. And even at the time when it felt like the heavens and the ocean were throwing all they had in anger at the house, they hold. See, the writer of Psalm 46 is reminding the people of Israel and us today that even though it looks as if creation itself is crumbling around them, God is stable. He's not shaken by the wind and the rain. He is not dislodged by an earthquake or blown away in a hurricane. He is stable and unmoving. The psalmist writes here, He is our refuge and our strength. And see, the Israelites would have understood these words differently than we do. We just kind of take it as like, he's a wall around us. He's a place that's 100% right. But when he says he's our refuge and our strength, we have to understand that they actually needed refuge in a way we do not. that they encountered a multiplicity of storms and disasters coming off the Sea of Galilee, one of the worst storm-faring seas in the world. They knew what it was like to be on the coast while a storm kicked up and you needed a safe place to go. The fishermen knew what it was like to have their boats in the harbor and what would happen when a storm came if you didn't have proper protection in place. They understood that. They understood that when they said, God is our refuge, it is Him standing between His people and the destruction that is coming for them. But it doesn't say God gives you a storm wall. It doesn't say God gives you a refuge. It says He is our refuge. He is the storm wall that breaks the waves to protect you in the harbor. He is the shield wall that guards you against the enemy's arrows. Because He is the refuge. And as He's our refuge, you need to understand this, He also becomes the source of our strength. When it says our refuge and our strength, that word strength literally to them would mean the source of the strength. It's not just Him acting on our behalf. It is Him acting and moving within us and giving us the very strength it takes to move on in the hardest of moments. Because when you're in a storm, sometimes you have to hold on and grip fast to something for stability. If you guys ever remember the old movie Twisters, sometimes you have to wrap your arm around the pole and hold on, or the storm's just going to rip you out. God is the source of the strength to endure. And it's hard. There's never in a promise, right? This assumes storms. This assumes the earth falling out from beneath your feet. This assumes bad things are happening to you. He doesn't talk about if it's because of you and your decisions and the choices you've made, or it doesn't talk about if it's a natural phenomenon, or it doesn't talk about as if it's somebody who's just trying to oppose what God is doing. It just assumes it's going to happen. Because it doesn't matter the reason why you're in the situation. The solution in order to endure is always the same. He is our refuge and our strength. Later, the psalmist will write, another psalmist will write, that He is our strong tower if we would just run into it. If we would rest in Him. If we would trust Him. Here he writes that they're not afraid. Therefore, we will not be afraid, though the earth trembles and mountains topple into the depths of the sea. I don't know about you guys, but if I looked outside and I saw a mountain toppling into the sea, I'm probably going to be shaking a little bit and scared. And these, you have to remember, right? We understand most of the science about these things now, right? We understand when someone says, oh, Mount St. Helens blew her top, that's a literal thing that can happen. We understand the destruction. They were looking for answers. And their answer was, we might not know why, but we know how to endure. And it is all in where we go. And we go to God for our refuge and our strength. We go into His presence because it is in the presence of God that we receive the strength to endure. It is there that we will be secure to endure the storm. He's our protection and protector. It says here, He's the ever-present help in time of need. Right here, he says that He is always found in times of trouble. God's never far from us. He doesn't abandon us in the hardest moments of our lives. He's there, able and willing to surround us, comfort us, to give us peace, and to help us endure that which is around us. Because when everything shakes, God is still stable. And God still holds you to himself. He's not shaken. He's not moved. He is not weakened or overcome. He has proven time and time again to be the one who protects what is his. And because when our lives are shaken, when we are biding our time in the middle of a storm, and we cry out to him, "Why do you feel so far away?" We need to rest and understand that he isn't. Our God isn't like Baal, distant and unreachable while his people cry out in desperation. He is the Lord Most High, who is present with his people in the middle of the storm. The problem we have is not that God has abandoned his people, but it is that we so often panic in the storm instead of resting in his presence. And often we do that because we are so uncomfortable in his presence. It is hard to rest in the presence of a person whom you've been resisting. It is hard to rest in the presence of a person who you've been fighting. And we get uncomfortable in the presence of God, and a storm hits, and then we ask, "Where are you?" And God looks at us and goes, "I've been here. You walked away angry with me. You walked away upset with me. I've stayed. Come back." The door is open to the refuge. The protection is there if you need it. He is always there in times of trouble. We live in tornado country. What's interesting is that the differences between, say, Iowa and Kansas and here is in Iowa and Kansas, they tend to have storm shelters built into their properties. We don't, for whatever reason. I have no idea. But a storm shelter is only good if you go into it. It's no good to have a shelter that can endure the furious anger of a tornado if you put a lock on it and you cover it with leaves and sticks and you make it hard to access. It does you no good if you've barred the door and have a sign up. It does you no good if you won't let yourself go in there. God is our refuge and our strength. But he will let you try to fight on your own. Until it breaks you and you have to trust him. Church, the reason that we don't fear when the earth gives way is not because believers are just naturally braver than others or naturally more joy-filled than others. It is not because we're better. It is because we have faith in the one who cannot be moved. The one that we know when storms come and nations rage and tragedy strikes, that when fear rises, that God holds us fast. The one who is never shaken by the chaos of the world remains steady when everything else falls apart. Psalm 46 says more than God is just stable in the middle of chaos. It also says that he is stronger than the chaos. Verses 4 through 7 go over how not that God is strong. It's actually really interesting in verse 4. It says, "There is a river, its streams delight the city of God, the holy dwelling place of the Most High. God is within her. She will not be toppled. God will help her when the morning dawns." Her is the city. See, verse 3 brings up, remember, this is poetry, right? So the author is using poetic images. He's tying things together. He wants you to consider that when the mountain falls into the waters rage and they foam and massive things start to happen, right? This is an underground volcano causing a tsunami, causing a storm. This is the power. And then he goes, juxtaposition to that, there's a river that runs through the city, and it gives delight to the city of God. It provides, it is the source, it is the sustenance. Cities by rivers historically tended to flourish over time. The best place to set up a city was near a source of living water, moving water. See, the river then becomes a source of sustenance and of resources and of strength. You can utilize it. You can use it for war. You can use it for power. You can use it for food. You can use it for access and trade. All of these advantages. See, then the river becomes crucial to the life of the city. Whereas in verse 3, the idea is painted in our minds that the waters are scary. And if you've been out on Lake Michigan, or if you've watched Deadliest Catch and seen the storms up in the Bering Strait, storms in the open water are a terrifying, terrifying thing. In the pitch black of night where you see nothing, and a flash of light, and a wall of water, bigger than a house, facing you down. And then a river, which gives life, which becomes crucial to the flourishing of the city. That is what God's presence does. God's presence in a city, God's presence in a nation, God's presence in your home and in your life brings life. It sustains you and develops you. It protects you. He does all of those things. But it's interesting because it's not just his power to provide for the city. The author doesn't want to leave you with that. He says it down in verse 6, the nations rage and kingdoms topple, but the earth melts when he lifts his voice. See, it doesn't matter that nations are raging. It doesn't matter that wars are going on. It doesn't matter that the earth is shaking beneath the feet of marching armies. Because when God speaks, things happen. In Genesis 1, God spoke and creation was formed. At Mount Sinai, God spoke and a mountain shook. Jesus spoke and a raging sea calmed down. Jesus cried out, Lazarus, come out, and the dead rose. Speak Jesus' name and demons run and hide. The voice of God brings with it sovereign authority. Nations rage trying to execute and flex their authority and power over the world. God needs only to raise his voice and their power melts away before him, dissolving into nothing. The nations are in an uproar, chaotic, thundering. God merely raises his voice. It is the difference of like a children yelling and fighting and arguing, right? In a big group, they're all going at each other and screaming. It's loud. It's absolutely insane. And then dad just walks in and does that dad voice. And all of the children show a level of wisdom. And they grow silent. And they fade back. Because the real authority has entered the room. See, God's voice carries authority because it's rooted in the power and the person of his character, and no earthly kingdom, no earthly ruler, no heavenly kingdom can overcome it. And that's who stands for you. That's who fights for his people. That's who governs our days and is our refuge and source of strength. All earthly power collapses before the effortless authority of God. But how can he do this? How does he have this authority? How does he execute this authority? What sense does that make? Psalmist tells us he's the God, Lord of armies. When we went through the book of Malachi, what we saw is that it was often called the NASB, the Lord of Hosts, or the God of angel armies. I want you to think about that for a minute. Throughout the scriptures, when a single angel shows up, groups of people get terrified and fall down. When Jesus was being arrested, he merely affirmed their statement of him and said his full name, I am. And an entire Roman legion, upwards of 100 to 250 soldiers, fell to the ground in fear of the power from the voice of Jesus. Angels turn the tide in battles all throughout the books of 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And our God commands an army of an uncountable number of them. In World War II, as in most wars, enemy forces know and they do their best to verify where some particular generals and soldiers are because they don't want to be where those guys are. In fact, in World War II, it was such a terrifying idea for the Nazis to face General Patton that even though General Patton was on discipline, he was doing General Patton things and got in trouble. For D-Day, they positioned him way north from the beaches with his tanks because he knew that the Americans knew that the Nazis would congregate their forces to fight him. What's interesting about that story is the tanks were all inflatable. And he was one of maybe a dozen soldiers there, if he was even there. If one man could make an army reroute their entire plan, what could the Lord of angel armies do? Who could stand against him? Who would dare stand against the one who knocked down the most impenetrable walls of the ancient Near East of Jericho purely because they worshiped him in the process? See, the world may be in utter chaos, and people may be screaming in the middle of it, vying for power and influence and notoriety. But God is Lord over all of it and executes his authority even within the chaos. And his name reigns. So you need not fear. You need not worry. You need not give in because God is stronger than we even could imagine, and he is more than willing to protect us, more than willing to shield us. Because true to his character and his stability and his immovability, and true to his character and his strength and power, is also the reality of his character that he is faithful. Verses 8 through 11 paint a picture of God that is harder for us to understand. The Jews he was writing to would see when the psalmist says, "Come see the works of the Lord who brings devastation on the earth." They would know they're being invited in to look back at their history and see what God has done. To be invited into their history and see that God took the lowest of the lowly in Gideon, whittled down a fighting force to under 300, under 100 soldiers to wipe out an entire army by blowing trumpets. Who looked back into the history and they see Moses coming to the shores of the Red Sea with the Egyptian army, the military power, hunting them down while they had no military experience and no weapons, that they stand on the shore between a rock and a hard place, and God parts the seas and delivers them. He's calling you in to remember where God has been faithful. Because if you look back and you recognize and you go through and remember, oh, he's always shown up for me before. He's always provided. He's always taken care of us. We needed food in the desert. He provided quail and manna. We needed water. He made a rock spit like a fountain. We needed angel armies protection, and he guided our way with a pillar of flame. He always comes back for us. He always shows up for us. But you have to go and see. And the psalmist goes, come, look, come and see. Be reminded of who he is and what he has done. And then he grounds it in this. He's not afraid to judge evil either. He says, come and see the works of the Lord who brings devastation on earth, who passes judgment. Come and see the one who destroys evil when he finds it. Come and be reminded of how he has taken care of his people and disposed of evil. Come and see. You are invited in to see him stop wars, to see him turn armies against themselves, to see him turn the very land against those who try to claim it. You are invited in to see the faithfulness of God. And the psalmist is calling this out, and he doesn't even get it, the full picture yet. He's only hoping and looking forward because we have the ability to look back and understand that the ultimate act of faithfulness we get to look at God for is the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That we, in our hard moments, in our difficult times, we get to understand that we can look at what happened to Jesus and see that he is faithful to rescue us even when we fight against him. It's the reason these things get written down. The reason we get scripture and the stories that we have so that we can look at it and see that he is faithful. I've said it before and I can't say it enough. God doesn't tell you to have a blind, thoughtless faith. God tells you to have a faith that rings with come and see. God says, trust me, here's why you should. He gives you the means in which to look at and then be able to judge if he's a safe bet. And it's well placed, right here, in the middle of storms, in the middle of the armies that were coming against Israel, left and right. It's well placed. Because God makes this identity claim. He makes them see, he goes, hey, listen, see my works. He makes wars cease throughout the earth. He shatters bows and cuts spears to pieces. He sets water in a blaze. That's great. Now why? Where's his authority lie? I am God. Exalted among the nations and exalted on earth. He ends wars. He stops enemy armies because he is God. He's the one who created the heavens and the earth, the one who has the sole right to judge the world. But I want you to look at verse 11. Verse 11 says, the Lord of armies is with us. We got that one. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Why not the God of Abraham? Why not the God of Moses? Why not the God of David? Why the God of Jacob? Jacob, who was a liar. Jacob, who was visibly flawed. Jacob, who wrestled with God. Jacob, who is not commended for his faith or obedience to the Lord. In terms, it's called the God of your fathers. Go to Genesis, read the story of Jacob. It is not until the end of his life that it really gets cemented home that he is following, believes, or trusts God. So much so that the author, like I said, refers, when they talk about the God of your fathers, not your God. So why is he the God of Jacob here? Why, in the middle of the storm, in the middle of difficulties, in the middle of people coming to attack you, does the author go, hey, this is the God of a weak, flawed liar, of a guy who was in it for himself, of a guy who had no problem lying to his brother, of a guy who had no problem stealing to his brother, of somebody who was so proud and arrogant that he told God as they wrestled, I will not quit until you bless me. Why him? Because he's not just the God of the strong. He's not just the God of the rich. He's not just the God of the perfect and the righteous and the hyper-religious. He is the God of even those who struggle against him, of even those who doubt him and question him, so long as he is your God. So long as you follow, so long as you worship, he's there. You get to fight with him. You get to argue with him. You get to ask God why. You get to say, I don't understand. You get to say those things. And he's still your God. He says, you just need worship me. He will bring you comfort, even if you fight with him. He will bring you peace, even if you doubt him. Because he's the God of Jacob. So he's yours too. Even when we struggle with him, even though we doubt him, he's still willing to be our stronghold. He's still ours. And for those of us who are found in him, those who believe that Jesus is who he says he is, that he's done what the Bible has said that he has done, and that he's doing what he said now, for those of us who believe that, we are his too. And he holds jealously to what is his. Being his is the greatest advantage we could have in life. It's not a guarantee of an easy life. It's likely the opposite. But it is a guarantee that his promises will come true and that he will protect us. That he will give us strength, that he will shelter us, that he will save us, that he will redeem us if we believe. Kingdoms fall and nations rage. The earth shakes beneath our feet. But Jesus Christ walked out of the grave alive, proving once and for all that the promises of God cannot be shaken. And because he lives, those who belong to him do not face the storm alone. Life gets crazy and things start to shake apart around us. But God is stable enough to shelter you, strong enough to protect you, and he is faithful to save you. He is our stronghold. We need not be afraid. And I know that there are people here going through that moment. I know that there are people here who have cried out to God in the last 10, 7, 5 days. I know that there are people who are asking God, where are you? Why won't you show up? Why are you letting this happen? I can't tell you the specific reason. Anyone who says that they can is probably lying. But I can tell you this much. He's allowing you to walk through it for his glory and your betterment. That you would grow closer to him, or maybe reach out to him for the first time. That you would find peace in the middle of a storm. That you would find refuge from the enemy's attacks. And he's calling. And his gates are open. And he has said, repent and believe. If you're in that moment where you're not sure, just go to him for forgiveness, for salvation, for strength, and for peace. He is our refuge and our strength. We're going to play the last song. I'll pray after. If during the song you need prayer or after, please come and find me. When you guys are ready, stand and sing.